everybody! My name is Emma. I am currently a grad student, so I have a lot of experience studying. So I wanted to share some of my current knowledge about studying that is scientifically based, and I will leave citations in my description. But I know that when I TA students, a lot of them come to me saying they have a really hard time trying to study, or at least memorizing the information effectively. I wanted to give some people a basis. Now, I know that a lot of people have done research on this, and so I don't know all of the research, but people often just struggle to find the time to do studying, or at least to do it effectively. So I want to give all of my information on how we can actually study effectively. So are create, test, and adjust as needed. So what should you actually do? The first thing you should do before you even attend class is you should read the textbook. This gives you the chance to interact with the information before really needing to memorize it. Because in the class, the teacher should be teaching you the information that really matters for your test or for your application skill-based test, whatever you are going to be tested on. So if you've read the chapter and you've at least seen the information, it will be easier to interact with once you actually get to class. Then, during class, please take notes. As a TA, as someone who has now been an instructor for a course, I beg of you, take notes in class. Especially if you can do it by hand, it's better than writing it on a computer. When you write notes on a computer, you can basically mimic exactly what the teacher is saying into the notebook. However, if you are writing by hand, you have to summarize the information and write it down. So you get a lot of different benefits from that. Two big bonuses is you are actively listening, so you're hearing what the teacher is saying. Then you are summarizing the information, so you're making it more important to you and more valuable by making it shorter. And so this leads to a lot of thinking rather than copying. You get to study the material when you're just learning about it because you have to summarize it for yourself. After the class, my recommendation to have effective studying is to try to review the information by either the night of the class or at least by the end of the week from the class. Because if you just stop with reminding yourself about the information right after the class, first of all, you'll lose your memory of exactly what was said in the class, so you lose a lot of the basic information that you need, but your brain will also just drift away and not have the same interaction with the notes as if you review them pretty close after the class. I also recommend doing this later at night, right before you're going to go to bed, because that leads to better consolidation of information. This is especially important if, for example, you have an 8 a.m. class or even earlier, which I can't imagine. If you've got a really early class in the day, by the afternoon that information is drifting away, it's not consolidated. Now, how about when it actually comes to studying? There are quite a few, I wouldn't call them hacks, but pieces of information that make studying a lot easier. The first thing is do not just read your notes that you took from class or highlight your textbook. That's a really bad idea. You're not actually interacting with the information then, you're just becoming fluent in reading it. So if you read your notes over and over again, especially because they're in your voice, you may be able to practice them out loud, but you're not actually absorbing the information. Because you're not interacting with the knowledge that you just learned, you're not actually gaining any more memory from that. If you're just reading the textbook over again, yes, you are interacting with the information a little bit more and you're getting the original information memorized. But just because you can read it faster doesn't mean that you can actually use the information on an exam when you're asked to. So it's not very applicable if you're just trying to read the textbook over and over again. Though I do know someone who has done extremely well in school by just reading the textbook the night before the exam to try to consolidate the information. Still, this is not recommended because it's not seen as effective as the other methods that I'm going to suggest. Another way of doing it is not the best, but you can recreate your own notes and rewrite them in a way that makes them meaningful to you. So, for example, if I'm thinking of the concept of distraction, it's really easy for me to think of an example of that currently because my dog keeps growling, and that's distracting me from making this video that I've been trying to make for a while. So, I might write down, my dog is extremely distracting. And that fits the definition of distraction, is pulling your attention away from something you were attempting to focus on. Now, that's not the best, but it is a way to consolidate the information better in your mind. What would be better would be to use a tool, possibly an AI tool, to help you create questions that represent the information that you are to learn. Now, the reason I'm saying this is better but not the best is because at least you're testing yourself on the information. And there seems to be a testing effect where people who test themselves on the information are better at using the information in the test form because they've practiced using the information in the test form. So if you get something to create questions for you to help you look at your notes, that's better. Although I don't like AI and I don't think it's good for the environment, it's a tool that a lot of people use. Now, this has the added benefit of summarizing information onto test questions, and it might not cover all the test questions. So you really do need to have control over exactly how you create your test in this way for it to be effective. It also may tell you lies because AI is not all that smart. Now, if you really need to memorize this information and you want to have it down pat for the test, the best way to memorize information for classes is to create your own test questions and then test yourself with them. Now, this can take lots of different forms. This can take the form of actually creating a physical test paper and then printing it out and testing yourself on it, which is very effective. This can take the form of creating little study cards where you put a definition on one side and the word on the other, and you're able to flip back and forth. And so you read the question and you flip it to the other side to get the answer, and you memorize that way. This can also take the form of creating those cards with full questions on the front and full answers on the back. And you can test yourself multiple ways with these cards. One way is to read, of course, the question on the front and then flip it to the back and have the answer there. Another way is to actually start by looking at the back of the card and then flip it over to the front when you have suggested what the question might be. This is just a way of consolidating the information in your brain. And then to add on to that, the way I always used them is I always read the question first and then flipped them around to the back. But I started moving the cards closer and closer to my memorized box as I went through them. So I would test myself on the question. If I read the back and I got it right, it would move over one box. Then I would focus on the next question. If I got it right, it would move over to the one box. If I got it wrong, it would stay in the box that it was in. Then they moved through 3 separate boxes. So it was obviously don't know and I'm not getting it right consistently to I'm not getting it right to perfection, but I am doing better at it. And then the third box would be I'm getting this right all of the time. And this would just allow me to test the cards that I got wrong more often, more frequently. The goal in this method is to get the cards to the final box before the exam. Especially the night before the exam, you hope that they're all in the final box. So you would assume that your knowledge is consolidated. To have this method be used effectively, you do have to have a card for all the concepts that you struggle with at all. So if you don't know the information automatically and intuitively, you have to create a card about it. So it does take a lot of time in both the creation of the cards process and the testing of the cards process. Now, for the benefits that you usually get from this is you get the creation of the cards, which in itself can help you memorize the information because you are working with the information to create the cards. You also get the benefit of ordering the cards into yes, I understand and no, I don't, which is kind of a meta knowledge of the cards. How much do I know that I know the cards? And then 3, you get the testing effect every single time you test something because you have the question and you give yourself the answer. I would say that that would be the most effective version of studying because you get benefits from many different levels. And just make sure that you are studying at a time in a day where you are aware, and preferably in the afternoon because it's closer to sleep, which leads to consolidation of information. Yeah. My main takeaway for this is remember that good studying does take time, but you will be able to use the information much more effectively and you will have it memorized for longer. So you might as well take the time the first time around than to continue to memorize the same information throughout your degree. All right, thank you.